Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There it goes.
Okay.
All
Cool.
right. Awesome. All right. Well, Franklin, thank you so much for getting on Zoom today and meet with myself. I know that this probably isn't the way that you imagined you'd be talking about making arrangements for yourself, but I can assure you we do this all the time for our families. That's kind of the new age way of doing things, and we can get just about everything done remotely, which is great with this kind of technology. So I appreciate you getting on Zoom. Are you familiar with Zoom? Is this the first time doing it, or do you use it to talk to family in the past?
Oh, my daughter helps me sometimes, but I know a little bit about it.
Perfect. Well, I promise you won't have to do too much figuring it out today. What I'll do is kind of help on my end to record everything we're talking about, and then I'll be able to send you copies of what we go over today as well via your email address. Um, real quick, I just want to get to know you just a little bit before we really dive in. Are you from the area? Have you lived there a long time?
Yeah, my family's been here in Whitehall for probably about uh 20 decades, I'd say.
My gosh, 20 decades, huh?
Yes, sir.
Um, that is, gosh, how far does that go back? 200 years or so? Is that accurate?
Would be, yep, yes, sir.
So you've been there forever. Got it. Since it was founded, I'm sure in Montana. You know it well. That's great. Um, and is the family still out there with you, or did they spread their wings and
They're relatively close, I would say.
okay, relatively close? Does that mean within Montana, or are they
Yeah, some go down to Dillon and Helena as well, but I'd say they're mostly in Montana.
Oh, great. Well, that's good. You can keep an eye on them. That's
Yes, sir.
awesome. Are you working still, retired?
No, I'm retired military.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, thank you for your service. We'll talk more about your service in just a little bit, but are you finding that you get to get out of the area much, or you like to stay right where you're at?
I go to the gas station every now and then to get some meet with some friends and get some coffee, but other than that, I mean, I relatively stay pretty close to my home.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, good. Yeah, it's a great place to be. So nothing wrong with that. I love it. Awesome. Well, if you don't mind me asking, how familiar are you with K&L mortuaries? Have you been there before?
Yeah, I've had a few of my relatives come in here through.
Oh, okay. So you've been to services for those relatives. Were you
Yes, sir.
involved in arranging those services?
Yes, with my dad.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How long ago was that?
Oh, that was, I'd say, probably about 2 years ago now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, still relatively recent. So I'm sure that's
Yeah, he was ready to go though. He was a veteran in the war, Vietnam War, and he went through a lot. So
oh man. Um, well, it's great that you've kind of used K&L and familiar with us. It's always under unfortunate circumstances. I know it's hard to kind of relive those moments, but if you wouldn't mind me asking, if you could just walk me through what the services you put together for Dad, what was it like on that day at the funeral home?
yeah, so we had a funeral service at the church, um, and then we had a memorial side at the grave side with all the military there, and yeah, and it was really memorable, I'd say. I had a lot of family come in and visit, so that was good. It was a little hectic though, because uh, Dad didn't have anything planned out, so it was a little stressful that day because we were spending a lot of time in the funeral home trying to figure out how we wanted it. Dad just always thought that it would be taken care of because he was in the military, but it wasn't always. I guess he didn't realize it was not always that way. So
Yeah. It is unfortunately a common misconception that the VA is going to take care of it all. There are some benefits that I'll be sure to touch on with you. But I'm sorry you went through that, especially having it fall on your shoulders when the family and your father thought it was all taken care of. So that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Um, but I appreciate you sharing that. Was there anything you would change or do differently about that day, or did everything go pretty smoothly?
For the most part, I say it went as smooth as it probably could have, minus all the stress and just trying to figure out what exactly Dad wanted. But I'd say, I think just maybe, I just think for me, maybe just wanting to take the stress out of it, knowing that, so my kids don't have to guess what I want. I guess is just really what I'm trying to accomplish here, I would say.
Absolutely. I think that's very commendable and certainly will make this experience a lot easier on your children, compared to what you went through for your dad. Um, and if you wouldn't mind me asking, was there any parts of those services for dad that you felt were most impactful, kind of most memorable, and you really want to make sure happen maybe in your services?
Yeah, I'd say when they was doing the eulogy, I really respected some of the things I heard I didn't know about Dad did from some of his old military buddies. But I would just say just the funeral and the service, I remember just uh, feeling a lot closer to him, learning more about him that I didn't know.
That's great. Yeah. It's interesting how we learn so much about somebody at a service, and we hope that we had hoped that we would have known that about them before they were gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that's really important to have a time and place to share those stories and memories. And then before I kind of really dive in here, I always like to ask our families if you could point to just one most important reason for doing this here today, what would you say that most important reason for doing this is?
I would just say that, like I mentioned before, just kind of take care of it so my kids don't have to um, be running around and stressed like I was with Dad, and just making sure that we could eliminate some of that stress. Um, Also want to make sure that they don't have to pay for it too. I know
Sure.
the VA typically covers most of it, but just want to make sure it's all in order.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's always important to keep that in mind as we move forward in this conversation, and make sure that we keep them in mind as we make plans and ensure that we take care of them during that time. So, yeah, again, I appreciate you sharing that. So, as promised, I have your final wishes organizer. And this is something that we actually put together to take care of about 95% of everything ahead of time. We, of course, can't schedule like a funeral service ahead of time, but we can make all the decisions about what happens at that service. We could be as detailed as you like. It takes care about we estimate 75 to 125 different decisions, pieces of information, and documents to collect ahead of time. So, because most families don't spend more than about 5 minutes talking about this ahead of time. So, you're already in a league of your own, just having started this conversation, and the organizer makes it easy to complete the rest. So, I have a digital version of it here. Like I said, I'll be able to email you a copy of this so you can have it on file and keep it for the family to view if they want to. We'll also keep a file here at the funeral home once it's complete. So. I'll go ahead and share my screen here and we'll have you follow along with me. You see that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So, the first page of the organizer here actually starts by highlighting that reason for pre-planning. And like I said, we always just want to keep that in mind. It's kind of our focal point for making these arrangements today. And it's such a wonderful way to start the organizer because if the family decides to go and take a look at your organizer years down the road, maybe when the time comes, they actually get to see that you had them in mind as you pre-plan. So, um, your reason for pre-planning, I'll just put in here, was to is to relieve the stress of decision making and costs on day of services.
Yes, sir.
Oh, this is for the kids.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. And how many kids do you have? Remind me.
I got a boy and a girl.
All right, perfect. So they won't have to sit there and decide, is this what dad would have wanted? They'll get to kind of just be there for one another. And that's kind of a great segue into the common reasons why people plan ahead. One of them being is that they just get to be there for one another and really connect and support each other during that difficult time instead of dealing with disturbing funeral details. I'll quickly touch on these other common reasons because I think it's important to cover these and kind of feel good about what we're doing today. So the tasks and decisions that would burden the family members later are decided ahead of time. That's kind of a no-brainer, but I think, it can be a lot, right? You know the answers to all these questions and tasks ahead of time, but the family might take longer, again, on one of the most difficult days of their lives when they lose you. So the family members have no doubts about what the funeral or disposition should include. So they're not left wondering cremation or burial and what would dad would have wanted and all these things. So that gives the family peace of mind, knowing that the arrangements are taken care of. Of course, I touched on they are able to spend that time with each other and not just at our desk at the funeral home. And then finally, we can ensure that the costs have been addressed, oftentimes leaving nothing for the family to worry about. We will touch on how we do that a little bit later. So I think those are important, but I would say that the most common reason overall is actually the one that you said, and that is to just relieve the burden from children, from remaining loved ones, so they don't have to stress on that day. So we always love to hear that. All right. So next page here, we call it the personal planning guide. And what this does really is actually just answers all the questions that a funeral director would be going through with your family on that day. And so again, going back to like how long it would take the family, if you ask these questions about my own mom, I wouldn't know the answer right off the top of my head, right? I have to go home and do homework on that during that time. So having these questions down from you just gets it done, and there's no wondering what the answers are when you're already gone. So we'll quickly run through this. I know your first name already. It's Franklin. And remind me your last name.
Taylor,
Taylor. All right. Do you have a middle name?
Scott,
Yeah. All right. And then address.
29300 East Stallion Lane. And that's in Waller, Texas.
Am I spelling all that right?
Yes, sir. 77484.
Perfect. All
Eight
right.
two
Sorry, I missed it. What would you say?
832 684 1196.
All right. And do you have an email address?
Yeah, bucking cowboy at gmail.com.
I love it. All right. And Franklin, where were you born?
Uh, Dillon, Montana,
Do you happen to know the county that was in?
Wade County.
Wait. All right. Oh, wait. All right. And what day were you born?
March on the 17th, 1956.
Six. All right. And then one thing that needs to go on the death certificate is the social security number. Are you comfortable sharing with that here?
Yeah, it's 596.
We'll just do it right there.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
All right. And then your usual occupation in life. What's been your job?
I'm a welder.
Well, there. All right. How many years did you do that for?
35 years.
35. All right. We'll go ahead and call that the industrial industry there. And what would you describe your race as, Mr. Taylor?
Oh, Caucasian.
Caucasian. All right. And your highest level of education?
Military, just kidding. High school. I guess you could say trade school.
Okay, yeah. So you went to trade school after high school, correct?
No, no, I enlisted I got drafted in the military, and when I came back, I went into trade school.
Got it. Okay, that works. All right, and we'll go on and just stick with male on the gender there. And are you married?
Yes, sir.
All right. What's your spouse's name?
Helena,
Middle name
Beatrice,
and last name.
Taylor.
All right. And then these stats on here, the month of marriage, where the marriage took place, really apply for if you're planning on posting an obituary in the newspaper. Um, it sounded like earlier you were thinking of doing that, so we'll go through putting this on here. Do you happen to remember when you were married?
Yes, sir. November 24th. And that was in 1974, I believe.
And where were you married?
Uh, that we was I was married. We was married at we was married in actually Whitehall. Yeah, we just down the road in the chapel,
Perfect.
Montana.
All right. And what is your father's name?
Uh, John.
All right. We're going to say Taylor there. And where was John born?
He was born in Illinois,
Okay.
Chicago.
Chicago. What's the county for
I'm not sure the county. I think it was Chicago.
We'll get it figured out. That's totally fine.
Okay,
It's helpful though, the Chicago.
I could find out for sure.
Yeah. Just for your reference, that the city is good for the obituary. For the death certificate, we just need the state. So, all right. And then your mother's name.
Um, Helga.
Helga. And what was Helga's maiden name?
Borgerson. Yeah, you got it right.
And where was Helga born?
She was born in Mississippi.
Mississippi. I think that's the right one. Yep. Miss. And do you remember the city?
Don't know the city.
Right.
Uh,
Something you can get back to me on if your mother's still with us.
yeah, I could ask her. I know she was born in Mississippi though.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, that takes care of a lot of important stuff just right there, which is great. Kind of moving on to some emergency contacts. Who would you say would be, if this happened tomorrow, who would we be in contact with, kind of your next of kin? Would that be your son or daughter? Or I guess your wife at this point.
Yeah,
Is your wife with us?
I maybe my wife and maybe my son.
Okay. So we'll put Helga. We have Helga's name and address is the same.
No, Helen is my wife.
Sorry, that's right. And Helena lives the same address, or does she live somewhere else?
Yeah, yes, sir.
And that's spouse. And same phone number or different one? Or
Um, yeah, same phone number.
yeah, you guys got a landline. Perfect. And then your son's name.
Uh, Freddie.
And where does he live?
He lives at 291 West, 730 North, in Dillon, Montana.
And his phone number, we'll
Eight.
just
Yep. 555 555 555.
perfect.
Then
So
his email is buckandcowboyjr@gmail.com.
oh boy, Junior, of course it is. All right. And if I know that Freddie doesn't live with you, and just in case he's out of the area, just in case Helen is out of the area for any reason, is there anybody else local who you'd want to have as kind of an emergency contact on here?
Yeah, Steve
Oh, I did it in your accent. Steve.
Scroggins, just like it sounds.
And we don't really need the address. Does he live here in Whitehall?
In Dillon, about 45 minutes south.
And that's a friend of yours?
Yes, sir. Military buddy.
All right. Perfect.
We served together.
And his phone, we'll say, is well, force, forward Y at gmail.com.
Yeah, how'd you know?
Had a hunch. All right. So we will get back to more context in just a little bit, but um, I'll talk about why that's important. In general, we can keep more contacts on file here at the funeral home, just kind of a nice list of people who need to be called when the time comes. So we'll get back to that. I want to talk about your military service. Remind me which branch you were in.
The Air Force,
Air Force. Okay.
Delta
And
Services.
and I guess I didn't ask when for your dad's services, was he interred at a veterans cemetery?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. And were you thinking of joining him there?
Yeah, well, I got a plot next to him
Okay,
for me and
perfect.
my wife.
Okay, perfect. So just for your reference, at a veteran cemetery, you can get pre-qualified to be interred there. You don't have to, but your key to being interred there is your DD 214 discharge papers. So is that something you're aware of where that is? Do you have a copy of it somewhere?
Yeah, I believe I have him.
Perfect. So that will be something, maybe a homework item for you is to find that, maybe make a photocopy of it. You can also bring it by the funeral home. We can make a photocopy of it, keep it on file. The reason for that is it really helps to expedite things when the time comes of applying for any veterans benefits, such as the Veterans Cemetery. And we can take you to the same one that your dad's at, assuming they have availability still on that day. I believe the one in Montana should be still plenty of spots open. But the key here is that we can't reserve a spot for you ahead of time at the cemetery. So you don't get to kind of walk up to a spot in the ground and say, that's the one I'm going to be at. You kind of get what you get when the time comes. And they're always beautiful cemeteries. They're very well maintained. Obviously, we want to take good care of our veterans. But that is kind of the consideration with the veteran cemeteries. So, assuming they have a spot on that day, we'll take you there, and then your wife is able to be interred there as well whenever she does pass. And typically, it's free of charge for both a veteran and their spouse to be interred there. Um, Sometimes at a state-run cemetery, we'll have to double check on the one in Montana if it's state-run or not. But they usually charge just about $700 or $800 for the spouse to be interred there. So in the grand scheme of things, pretty good deal for the spouse compared to paying for a private cemetery. But just important for you to know that we can probably take you there. I just always have to kind of give you that heads up there. So as soon as we get your DD214, this will all be complete and we'll have everything we need. In addition to the Veteran Cemetery, we can also request for the service the Honor Guard to play taps and gun salute if applicable, folding the flag, handing it off to the family. Was that a part of your dad's services?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. And would you say you'd want that to be a part of your services as well?
I would say so. Correct.
I agree. I think it's a powerful ceremony. There's usually not a dry eye in the room when they're playing taps, and it's certainly a great way to honor your service. So we'll go ahead and indicate that we're going to request honors and that we want a flag. Um, I suppose I didn't ask you yet about cremation or burial, but have you decided on one of those two? Because that will factor into our preferences here.
I'd be buried.
Okay. So a nice way to do that is to have the flag draped over the casket when it's getting to the cemetery. Um, is that something you'd want to see?
Yes, sir.
So I'll indicate that here. And we want the veteran cemetery. Yeah. Okay. We have military. And then I know it says military marker plaque here. I'm going to leave this one unchecked since you're using the veteran cemetery. Um, we don't have to make a special request for a plaque at a private cemetery. That's really what that question is asking there. So we will be sure to
What
you'll
does,
have a
what does
mark
the flag folded mean?
flag folded. So that would be instead of draping the flag over the casket, we
Oh,
could just have it folded and hand it to your wife on that day or whoever you're.
I
Uh,
think I'd prefer that instead, actually. So
okay,
she can have something to remember me by.
absolutely. Um,
Kind of like a keepsakes.
yeah, yeah. I know it doesn't like detail this out here, but just for your reference, when you drape the flag over the casket, they'll take it off before it goes.
Oh,
So
okay. Well,
they
then
will.
we can have the draped if that works too, then.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that sounds great. So the family bill will take that home with them. And that's all free of charge right there. And that's about the extent of what the VA will cover. So important for you to know. So the cemetery is all taken care of, which is great. We will still talk about caskets and transportation and getting you there as our services. So we'll cover that in just a second. Any other organizations you're a part of, Freemasons, any other fraternal or professional organizations who would be involved in the funeral service, would you say?
No, just cum laude at Montana State, but nothing. That was just some buddies.
Sure.
That's
Okay.
it.
So we'll leave that there. Maybe it's be a good reference point for the obituary. Um, I'm not sure they would do anything at the funeral service, but it doesn't hurt to have it in the notes there.
Maybe crack a beer. I don't know.
There you go. Crack a cold one. Perfect. All right. So before we start to dive into talking about specifics and your arrangements here, We um we actually educate every family on what's called the acute loss period, and the reason why is it's actually our framework for planning ahead. And the reason for that is it's a non-negotiable process that we actually all go through when we experience loss. And this could be the loss of a family member, it could be a national tragedy, or any kind of loss experience that we go through. We find that this universal process is something that we all tend to go through. And so I'm going to zoom in here actually so you can see it better. But the acute loss period is this little wheel here on the right-hand side. And a lot of people think that when selecting our arrangements, we just have to choose cremation or burial. What we often forget is that our death doesn't really belong to us. It belongs to all those who have ever loved us, right? And so we want to keep them in mind, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, when we plan ahead, because it's those folks who will be left after we're gone and need to be taken care of. And so I'm going to quickly walk through the acute loss period just to give you a reference point before we start diving into arrangements. There's some parts of it that we can make a plan for, and there's some parts of it that are a little more unpredictable. So on that first phase, there is hearing, and that's hearing the news. So for my own Uncle Melvin, when he passed away, he was a veteran as well. And I heard the news. I was just sitting in a restaurant, right? I couldn't predict when that was going to happen or how it was going to happen. But it is inevitable and certainly memorable and unforgettable experience. So that's the first phase, is just simply hearing the news. I picked up the phone to share that news with my sister, who was, I think she was still at school that day. And so that's an automatic response there is we make sure that everyone is in the know. And that conversation usually ends with when is the service going to be? Right. And so that answer to that question is really code for when am I going to be able to see the people that I care about? So not only do we see each other at the funeral home, but we also oftentimes get to see the deceased, right, in the form of a viewing or visitation. And so if you've been to one of these before, maybe you had one for dad, it is oftentimes we hear it's a very impactful experience where people get to kind of process their grief and give that final goodbye to that person. Maybe if they haven't seen them in a while, offer, condolences to the family during that time. So those initial conversations kind of start to happen at the viewing or visitation. And then certainly after that, we gather together. We gather the funeral home. We share a eulogy, like the one you experienced for your dad, which sounds like it was a very impactful experience for you. We share stories, we say prayers and hymns oftentimes, and really just connect with one another. That's kind of the next phase there is connecting. We connect with our loved ones, people that we haven't talked to in a long time. It's an experience I had at my own uncle's services as I got to see and talk to and connect with people on a deep level that I hadn't talked to in a long time, family members and friends of his and loved ones. He was very well respected in the community. And so got that chance to really connect with them on a deeper level during that time. And then we reflected on his life, of course, but we also reflect on the family of the deceased. And so, his family's lives were changed from that day. Our lives were changed, and we take inventory of our current priorities in life. A lot of deep thought really happens during that time. And then the final phase is celebrating. And so we don't mean like fireworks in a parade necessarily, but for my uncle's services, we went out to lunch afterwards. We had a little reception where we got to break bread and really just make a little room for joy in the midst of our loss, having a laugh and just telling a fun, memorable story about him and just focusing on the positive a little bit during that time. And so that kind of completed the acute loss experience for us during that time. In the center there, it says begin healing. And I think a common misconception is that the funeral home staff really just deal with dead people all day long. It's a big part of our job, but I think the main purpose of our staff and us being there at the funeral service is to help your loved ones begin that healing process in a healthy way. And so the funeral home's always there to kind of be that central support system for your loved ones during that sensitive and difficult time, right? And so again, this is a non-negotiable process. If these phases are left unplanned, not taken care of ahead of time, then they are left up to chance, right? And so the gathering, connecting, reflecting, the conversations about your death happen in times and places we can't control. For example, at the kids' soccer game, or at church or school, or you run into members of the community and start to talk about that. Just really not the right time and place to do so. I think anyone could agree with that. So having a intentional plan in place means that they have that proper time and place to experience the acute loss period. So there's just some written examples of what viewing and visitation, funeral services, memorial, receptions down here. I kind of touched on all that, but we will talk about that in just a second here. Awesome. So we talked about your disposition preference is going to be burial at the vet cemetery. Um, Now, what I want to start off on here is kind of indicating where those places to connect with one another are going to be. And so the visitation slash viewing ahead of time is pretty traditional, we would say, and it would happen the day before a funeral service. Again, it's a time and place to come together and start to connect and have those conversations about you, and also just be able to see you, right? Open casket, out in the open, and a chance to say a final goodbye. Um, would that probably happen at the funeral home? Would most of these services happen in the funeral home? Or you mentioned the services at the church for dad. We could hold them there as well.
Yeah, probably the church, I would say.
And what's the name of your church?
Southern Baptist Church.
Southern Baptist. All right. And we'll say this is, yeah, Southern Baptist. Oh, that's not what I was asking. This is going to be a
What's the difference between public and private?
yeah, good question. So the public viewing is usually like a 4 hour block time, and it's a chance for friends and family, really anybody from the community to come and see you. Private viewing is really meant for just the immediate family. So I apologize. I should have asked you actually. Do you have a preference between the two? Do you want just a kind of an intimate viewing just for your immediate family and maybe a small group, or do you want kind of everybody to come see you? Thinking about and keeping in mind, obviously your reason is your kids, but you mentioned your military buddies. I'm sure you got other loved ones in the area who may want to see you.
Yeah, I'd say maybe public.
Okay, perfect. And just for your reference too, some people ask if I'm not viewable, if I'm not in good shape on that day, are you still gonna, force my family to come see me? No, we're not gonna force them to see remains that are unviewable. So I know that that's sometimes a hesitation of some.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that it is a dignified and a viewable experience. All right. And then funeral service itself, the next day, um, I assume would happen at the church. Is that fair to say?
Does it normally happen same day or next day?
Usually the next day. Yeah. If it's two separate events, it could be all done in one day, but um, usually separate.
Okay, what was the question?
The question is if the funeral would happen maybe at the funeral home. It doesn't really make sense to do that. If the visitations happen at the church,
Hey, the
probably,
church probably is when we would have the speaking done.
yeah. And that's going to be funeral. Just for your reference, funeral means remains are present like a casket, and memorial typically means that there's no remains there.
So like if I was cremated.
Yeah, if you were cremated and maybe the urn wasn't even there, that would just be a memorial service.
Okay.
But, uh, Southern Baptist. Oop, okay. And then afterwards, after heading to the cemetery for the graveside, we talked about having a reception afterwards where you can break bread. Would you want to designate a time and place for the family to have a reception afterwards?
Yeah, probably at the church right after the service. At my dad's, we had the viewing and the funeral service in the same day. Could that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I can make a note of that here. So we want this to be same day.
Just so my buddies, when they travel, they don't have to spend 2 days.
Yeah, I agree.
They're all over in Montana. So
All at once. No problem. All right. And then we're gonna go and say self is the owner of the cemetery property. It's really the state of Montana, but name of cemetery is the Montana Vet Cemetery.
then,
It's in Helena. Okay.
yes, sir.
We're going to say that is going to be most likely in the ground. I know that there's some above ground options there. Do you have a preference between in the ground or above ground?
Uh, at 6 feet under.
All right, perfect. Yeah, that's usually the go-to unless it's not an option. So we will put that as your preference then for now. And I'm just going to put an extra note here, funeral viewing in the same day, just so we don't miss that. All right, perfect. So it went ahead and auto-populated your name here. What I'm going to do is just kind of go through estimating your services here today and kind of give you a picture of if this happened tomorrow, this is what it would cost. And then we'll talk about your options for planning ahead right afterwards. All right. So today's date, today is 1/8. Oh, that's the new year. All right. 25.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's say this was 2000 and we're going to do embalming. That's 500. We're also going to need some cosmetics for you. And then viewing visitation. And then graveside service is going to be. And what I'll do here is show you, I'm going to recommend using a package from our general price list. And I'll show you the savings here. So in just a moment, I'll kind of give you a picture of how much you save, but just by using a package is what I recommend for you. It's going to be 600 and 400. All right. And then package savings, say minus 800 for that. Perfect. So then we'll total that up. Let's say the grand total. Come here. Say that's 1,000. Awesome. So just to give you an idea of what I'm writing here, the transfer deceased is our kind of starting point for transportation, right? So that gets you to the funeral home. And then the hearse gets you to the cemetery. So that's all pretty straightforward. We also throw in the flower van to transport any flowers as well. There's usually a lot of flowers at these kinds of services. Um, I also want to touch on what we call out of area protection. It's highlighted right here down below. And this is something that we actually include in every burial information plan. And it really makes sure it's part of our transportation program to make sure that you get back to the funeral home from wherever you pass away. So it takes care of the costs and logistics of bringing you back here if you were to pass away anywhere in the world. So I'm going to throw that onto your estimate here to make sure we have that complete peace of mind. All right. And then casket. So what I'm going to do is pull up some of my favorite casket options here and show you all of your options. We can select one, and let's just say that we went ahead and did that. So we'll say that casket number 5 so we chose. And the model number is here. That's going to be a wood casket, and it's going to be 4,000.
Damn.
That's kind of the going rate for a good solid casket these days. And it is a long-term stay in there, so you want to make sure you're in something nice, as well as the family seeing you in there, right? Okay. And then outer barrel container in Montana, I'm trying to remember if we do
Yes. 500.
500. Okay.
I don't know.
Let's say we do. Yeah, we throw that in there. You see number 4. Okay.
Probably a thousand.
I'm sorry.
Probably 1,000.
Yeah, it's probably more likely. Um, so other traditional things we see at services like this is like a register book. Um, Ours goes for 75, and then prayer cards. Are those things that you saw at your dad's services?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those comes in a pack of 100. Yeah. So let's go and total this up here. Let's say this is 5,000. All right. So I'm going to add these two sections up here. 4,000 plus 5,000, 9,000. Oh, it actually autofills over. That's kind of cool. All right. And then moving over to the side here, it's called cash advance items. Now, we always want to give you a full picture of what the costs will look like on that day. And so we include outside costs. We call those cash advance items. These are costs that we don't control, and they actually don't get locked in by prearranging, but we know that we still need to put money aside for them. So what I'll do is show you estimates of those at today's prices, and we'll talk about how we kind of protect against inflation there as well. So death certificates, I recommend anywhere from 5 to 10. They're for any bank accounts, pensions, trusts, life insurance policies, investment accounts that you might have. And usually these days, 5 covers everything that's essential. So So we can stick with that, unless you think you have a lot of assets and accounts you'll need to close out. Is that, what do you think based on that?
Yeah, five probably sounds good.
Okay. And those are 20 bucks a piece. Throw that in there. And then I know you mentioned obituary in the newspaper. Local obituary, the going rate is about 200 for Tana newspaper. Put an allowance aside for that. Flowers. Do you have a favorite kind of flowers?
Azaleas,
Lilies. Okay. And favorite color of flowers?
probably red.
All right. So we always recommend a nice spray when there's a full traditional service like this on the casket. We can also do a stand of flowers if it doesn't fit, or if you really want to have the flag draped, which I think we went over before. So it's just a nice touch to have some flowers. People always, they donate, they bring flowers as well. So I'm sure you'll have plenty to honor you. Good to have that spray there. And then another important part is clergy. So going rate for clergy is
What's
about,
that?
I'm sorry?
What's the clergy?
Clergy honorarium. So it's kind of a donation to the church, and we will actually reach out to your church. And typically it's not like an official charge, but it's again a donation to the church to have clergy have a priest come out and you know basically run the service,
Okay,
the MC, if you will. So there's non-denominational options, but it sounds like you're a church going family, so we'll stick with finding a pastor from your church on that day. I know it's tempting to name a specific one. I don't know if that priest will be around on that day, and so it's tough to say. But if you do have preferences, you can always let us know. All right, and I don't think we need any additional permits here in Montana, so we'll kind of zip down to escorts. This is fairly common these days, having police escorts to get to the cemetery. Does that sound like something you'd want to see for your services?
sure.
So going rate for those come in pairs. Okay. And then we talked about the gathering afterwards, kind of reception back at the church. Um, what that kind of implies is there will be food. For my uncle's service, we had finger foods and coffee and refreshments and whatnot. I know you wanted to have your buddies crack a couple beers, and so we can. What we can do is leave behind an allowance for the family to be able to to get a nice spread of food and refreshments for
Do
them.
we do we have to put in there the opening and closing, right? The intermittent for the
We we can, yeah.
do you normally?
I don't normally. Some cemeteries allow you to put money aside for that. If you want to leave allowance behind for opening and closing, we could certainly do
Do
that.
you
Just
normally do that or no?
I don't normally. We can. I think it is good to address that. And if it's a veteran cemetery, then don't, because that's all covered by the military. Um, but if it's a private cemetery, we would be able to leave allowance behind. It's one of those things that funeral directors hesitate to allow because it means that the family thinking that, oh, the opening and closing is taken care of by the funeral home. It's all taken care of, and then on that day, there's not enough money in the allowance to cover it, right? So if they're going to do that, you really want to overestimate. So let's say the going rate today is like 2,000, then I would bump it up to 3,000. But again, in this scenario, this is for veterans, so we're going to skip that. Um,
Good to know.
so, all right, and then going down here, sales tax. I'm trying to remember in Montana if we have sales tax. Let's say we do. It's 9%, and we're going to tax all the merchandise. Let's see. We'll say it's, I don't know, probably 500. So it's not going to total it up for me, unfortunately. That's okay. Let's just say the total here is, now,
2020,
you do quick math. Okay,
about 2,300 bucks.
that's enough. So we'll make it easy just so I can do quick math on totaling these all up. So total for our cash advance items is 2,000 and we got 9,000. So quick math here is going to be 11,000 kind of grand total. And then what we do is we always slap on the grand total, including out of area protection, just to give you a full picture of kind of the pay in full, if you will, at this point today. But really, if we were talking about, what the family would be paying if this were to happen tomorrow, we're looking at that $11,000 number right there. So the good thing about doing this ahead of time, Mr. Taylor, is that we do have options to address this. We don't have to do all this all at once. So I'll talk about those options here in just a moment. And of course, we always have the conversation about inflation as well before we dive into this. Since the 90s there, it's showing the rate of inflation for gas, cars, houses. I think it's a big conversation in our country right now about inflation, right? It's going through the roof. And so certainly with that, the cost of funerals has been going up. About 6% inflation is the good predictor of like on average how much it might go up over time. But the key here is that we know it's going to go up and we want to hedge against that inflation as best we can. And so we do offer ways to do that through what's called a funeral policy. So we use a funeral policy because, well, one, before I get to any of these benefits, we have to do this. We cannot legally hold your money ahead of time, but that's good for you because we want to make sure that money's safe in case something happens to us. But the first thing that the policy does is actually protects against that inflation. So it locks in that today's costs. So that $11,000 total is a non-factor for the family as it grows over time, right? They don't have to worry about whatever that cost might grow to in the future. The funds are protected by our insurance company. They're backed by them. So again, just in case something happens to KNL, if we go out of business, if our building burns down, worst case scenario stuff, you can transfer that to another mortuary with no penalty. It's very easy to do. It's also transferable in case you move out of the area. So if you ever decide to move to Montana, I know you've been here your whole life, but if you were to ever find a new spot to put down roots, you can certainly transfer that policy with you to another mortuary. Again, very easy, no penalty to do that. So gives you also complete protection with our plan since again we do include that out of area protection. This takes care of you wherever you go in the world, right? So we make sure you have that peace of mind, kind of home and away. They also offer some manageable payment plans that give you protection during the payment period. So you got day one coverage. If you were to pass away and the payments aren't done yet, the payments would stop and the whole funeral is covered by the insurance company. So really make sure that at any moment your family's not left with the bill, right? So important points there about pre-funding. And I'll show you some options here as we move down. Okay, perfect. So it's kind of filled in some stuff for me, which is great. It's showing, I don't know why it shows 5 years. That's kind of funky. That's definitely not right. This is showing like future cost estimates. So a little glitch on our document here. I apologize. I'm just going to remove all these numbers so as not to confuse us. All right. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of show you some options. To do that, though, I just need your current age, if you wouldn't mind.
69 years old.
Perfect. All right. And after we're done today, I didn't address it before. I made a mistake as a preneed counsel. I didn't ask about your wife. We can certainly have a conversation about her, or I'll ask her all this stuff and we'll get her prearranged. But today, Mr. Taylor will just take care of you.
Okay.
Is not usually what I would be doing. All right. Nice little learning experience for us. So what I'm going to do is pull up my rate calculator here on my end. So just bear with me as I find these options for you. Let me pull up my computer. It'll be a little bit quicker. And as I'm doing that, I'll kind of explain what options you are looking at here. Um, Rate calculator, there you are. So like I said, the insurance company offers four main payment plan options. First option's 3 year goes all the way up to 20 years, so 3, 5, 10, or 20-year options. The 3 year creates the highest monthly amount. And so, it's the shortest amount of time to be paying. That's pretty straightforward. The 20 year is the longest time to be paying. It's certainly a very long time to be paying for something, but does create the lowest monthly option. And so, if that's the only option, if that's, the only option that is affordable, then that's a great option. But most families actually try and shorten that by following either the 5 or even the 10-year range. The 10 year is actually the most common for our families. We find that it creates that manageable monthly amount, um, and it's reasonable to pay on a monthly basis. And then just knowing along the way you can pay off early, and there's no penalty to pay off early as well. So the 10 years, let's say you chose the 10 year. If you in 2 years hit the lottery or just in a better financial spot, you could pay off early, and then you'd be all set. The other thing to note here is that after the 10 years are up, you don't lose the coverage. It's not like once you're done paying, it's no longer covered by the insurance company. Your funeral is taken care of at any moment during the payments and beyond after that. So whether you pay off early, whether you pay the full payment term, you're taken care of that whole time. And knowing that your family is not left with the bill, your kids are taken care of, right? So I'll quickly write out these options here based on the calculations. So you're looking at 440 a month for the 3 year, 298.84 for the 5 year. These are monthly amounts, 198 even for 10 year, and then 155.84 for the 20 year. The out of area protection has two main options. It's 549 one time, or sorry, I got that wrong. For you, it's going to be 499. I got that really wrong. Whoop. Sorry, I'm getting my numbers mixed up here. Not making stuff up, I promise. So looking at anywhere from 3 year at 440 up to the 5 year, or sorry, 20 year 155. Like I said, 20 years long term to paying for something. So most people fall in the mid-year range. But based on those numbers that you're looking at there, Mr. Taylor, which one of these makes most financial sense to you?
I would do maybe the 198 a
Okay,
month fixed income, and then I'd do maybe the $50 a month for the out of out of area protection.
perfect. So what's due today then to get this started? I'll just kind of real quick calculate this out in my head. 248 will be our first month's payment to cover both of these things. So I'll write that in there. And then kind of details the options for early payoff down here, just so you know. 90 days, you have to pay off with no interest. So basically 3 months if you wanted to kind of take care of it and not have to pay anything extra over time. And then beyond that, again, I touched on no early payoff penalties. You can pay off anytime you want. There's no fee to do so. So you can make that decision when you're comfortable doing so. At the end of the day, we are taking care of your most important reason.
Do you know how much the interest is?
Yeah, good question. So the interest, quote unquote interest, is calculated based on your age. So somebody in their 50s will pay a little bit less than if you're in your 60s, but you're doing a lot better than somebody in their 80s, 90s, right?
Right.
Um, but the reason we have that interest built in is to provide that protection from the insurance company so that at any moment, if you pass away early, then your funeral's fully covered.
Oh, that
Um,
pays off the funeral then?
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So
wow.
let's say you were paying this 248 a month. I think, and that's just for the first year, because remember that out of area protection is for 12 months. So go down to 198 after the first year. Um, so let's say you're paying that monthly, and a year into it, something happens to you, you pass away. The payments stop, and the family's not left with that $11,000 bill, right? They're taken care of at that point. So um, It's really a way to relieve that burden, give you the peace of mind the whole time, and make sure that we don't have to ask them for a bunch of money on that day, which is just so uncomfortable for us to have to do. So it's really a win-win for everybody, right? Including the funeral home.
Okay, that makes sense.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is start to kind of write up some paperwork on my end. I'm going to stop the share of the screen here. So I'm going to write up some paperwork on our insurance company's platform. The insurance company, by the way, is called Funeral Directors Life. We call them FDL for short. I'll indicate the name and contact number of them on your paperwork here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on my end. As we're talking here. What I usually do while I'm writing this up to kind of fill the time here is actually I ask my families to start on that list of contacts of essential family members who you want to make sure get the call on that day. It's something that we can translate to your final wishes organizer here, but you could do it over email right now as we are waiting for me to finish up this paperwork on my end. And the reason for it, just so you're aware, is we actually have instances where some people who are essential family members, like sisters or brothers, they live out of the area and everybody assumes that they called that person on that day or somebody reached out to them to come to the funeral. And I have personally seen in some instances where somebody does not get the call to come to the funeral because it's a hectic time, as you can imagine. So if you feel that your children don't know everybody that you know, all of your friends and colleagues and loved ones throughout life that you want to have come to the service, you can write an essential list that we can hand to them on that day, and it can be part of the organizer. So it's something to work on as I write up paperwork here on my end. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want to go ahead and draft me an email, um, I'll share my email address right now, and you can go ahead and do that. But I'll be working on the paperwork while you do that. Sound good?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and do all the Digicon stuff. Um, and then we would sign remotely, via Digicon, or we kind of make arrangements for them to come into the funeral home to sign if they really not comfortable signing over email. But ideally, we kind of do all this while they're still on Zoom with you at that point. And then what I'd probably do at the end here is I would just go back to after we're done. I would say, okay, great, Mr. Taylor. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We're just about at the end here. You've got your copies of the insurance forms. You'll also get some stuff in the mail. So I will kind of go over what that looks like here in just a moment. I also want to make sure that I point out some contact information for Funeral Directors Life. That's the name of the insurance company holding the policy. Their contact number is right here, and your policy number is XYZ.
So when you ask him the two major health questions in Digicon,
So that'll be while you're going through Digicon, right? So that's why it's great to like
while they're
have.
creating that list, and what like because you said that like if you pass away at that point in time, if they are like let's say they had a heart attack within 3 years, and they pass the first question but they don't pass the second question, like what like did you just say that there's a return of premium for this period of time?
Oops. Return premiums plus 5% interest in the first year, and
Right.
then premiums plus 10% interest in the second year. Um, so you would just explain that modified coverage when they answer that question that way. I think I mentioned it before, but 80% of our families answer it with full coverage. So it's better to just move forward as if they're going to have full coverage. Even if they don't have full coverage, modified coverage, it's still that extra interest to help with the expenses on that day. So it's still going to benefit them. There's no reason to not do the payment plans. But you'll let them know, hey, in the first 2 years, you're not fully covered, but it's still good to start the payment plan.
Put anything in the to-do list or no?
So yeah, so to-do list, yeah, what I would put here. So I would just again remind them that their first payment in the amount of 248 right here. I'm just kind of summarizing 248 right here. All remaining payments of 248 we charge on and you would indicate this in Digicon. It's going to be the first of every month if that's what they indicated. And you've selected a 10-year. And then the out of air protection company, they're called Sepio Guard. Contact number is right here. Membership number is XYZ213. Payment is 50 and 12 months. Okay, perfect. So love the layout of that, but it just again summarizes everything for them. Their to-do list here is to send a copy of DD 214 discharge papers for the military. So that would be an example of like a to do for them. If they didn't answer something in the personal planning guide that still needs to be addressed, they didn't know the answer. Maybe they don't know where like their mom was born, for example. So
Yeah.
they need to figure that out. So, um, you know, send list of um, additional contacts. And then let's say, while you're going through that additional list of contacts, that you're like, oh, thank you so much for sending those. Is there anybody on that list of loved ones that you shared with me who you think would benefit from doing the same process of prearranging? I'd be happy to reach out to them if you'd like. And if they say like, oh no, I'll reach out to them for you. You say, okay, great. Who were you thinking for that? Oh, your sister Betty. Okay, well, reach out to Betty about pre-planning. There you go. That's a to-do list for them.
Okay.
And then their organizer is complete and you email it over to them. Email the organizer and the FDL documents and the CEPIO guard stuff um, to Brian at KNL, for example, and make sure he has that on file. Um, but this should serve as everything needed. Some funeral homes will want you to have them sign like authorization forms, like cremation authorization, whatnot. But not every single one. So it's one of those things. Like I think when we were talking to Callahan, they didn't need that signed. So
Yeah,
just
it wasn't. But in Utah, you can. He said Indiana said that like, they can't pre-authorize it legally.
which is unfortunate. It just creates like
Hassle in the future.
yeah, to give you an idea, like here in California, to sign off on a cremation, if you didn't do it ahead of time, you need multiple family members to sign off on authorizing that. So, as you can imagine, if there's no family in the area, it gets tricky to authorize that. So, just helps to get as much
Utah,
as.
you can. Utah, you can sign off beforehand. And if they can't get in contact with with the family members within 14 days, then they go ahead and do it. Anyways,
There you go. Yeah, I figure there's got to be some contingency plan of like, all right, well, if there's nobody, then let's just do
if
it.
you tried, then you can do it.
Exactly. So, but it's unfortunate that that is the case because what if that person didn't want to be cremated, right? It's just so sad to kind of think about that, and all the more reason to prearrange as many people as we can. So cool. That's about it. Any questions about the role play or that
That's
kind of?
about an hour and a half, then you'd say probably.
Yeah, and
It's an
it
hour
could be
and a half.
quicker, right? It could be quicker than that. There'll be families who don't want to do that full traditional service, right? Spent more time, talking about like where's the service going to be and all that military benefits and stuff. That's not going to apply to every family. So it just, yeah. But hour and a half is like pretty good for getting the whole thing done, I would say. I could do it in under an hour if it was a simple cremation. Maybe you're looking at 2 hours probably for these full traditional ones where they have lots of questions too. But once you get really efficient with it, you should be
You
good.
were when you were going through it, were you reading like the what were you reading? Were you reading like the normal like presentation manual?
I was just going off of like kind of the structure of the presentation manual. As
Like
you can
some of those things, like you were when you were reading through it, like did you kind of make your own script or did you kind of go through?
exactly. So it's kind of like I said when we first started meeting, like I have internalized the script. I know the structure of it. I edited it to kind of fit the remote presentation and the way that they've set up this final work wishes organizer is obviously different than the other one. Um, and so, but I use those key concepts and phrases like the ones in red about like we estimate there's anywhere from 75 to 125 different decisions per
Okay,
patient.
that's smart.
Like throw that in there, but you don't have to like follow the script to a T. I think the script itself is too wordy. And I think in this role play, I talked way too much as well. I should have made it more conversational. Usually it would be. I think that, in your case, you were sitting back and waiting and watching and kind of watching me do it, right? But a family usually would have more questions and they would be more conversational, I would say.
Yeah.
Uh, but they also might not be, right? So you're just ready to run through the presentation and expect no questions or a bunch of questions. Like it depends.
That's pretty
So
much how I anticipated. I was surprised that I thought you would spend a lot more time on the acute loss period, but I honestly think that was perfect how much time you spent on it. But in my mind, I would have, without having this experience, I would have spent way too much time on the acute loss period. And
yeah, it's
it's not meant to be like that. So
it's totally fine to spend like especially so most families you're going to meet with, I'd say especially at first, right? They're walking calling families. They called in the funeral home and they said, hey, I want to pre-plan and I want a simple cremation. I want as simple as possible. And so spending more time on the acute loss period for a family like that
different.
might be a beneficial thing to really emphasize the point of having that gathering plan. Um, in your case, you indicated that dad services went well and you had a gathering and that sounds like it was impactful and valuable to you. So I didn't spend like a whole lot of time trying to convince you of why it's important, but I also emphasize the importance of acknowledging the acute loss period and why it's important. So um, yeah, again, you'll just use your best judgment on how
Yeah.
much.
So you copied and pasted some of the like the highlighted things. So do you have a separate document or what?
No, I just again just kind of went off of memory. Um,
Because this I even have like
nice, yeah,
it
I
all on my wall. I don't know if you can see that.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, so yeah, I think like those you have them in sections, right?
Yeah,
So I think just like taking mental note of
the highlighted in red.
and then maybe the highlighted parts is a good idea so that you can follow along in your head of like, okay, I'm chit-chatting, I've got the topic warm up, I'm collecting the evidence of like what funeral service means to them, and then talking about the organizer, why it's, important, and then jump into the organizer, right? So it's just I followed that structure, but I didn't touch like every single word of the script because I want to make it more natural.
I would have spent way more time than you would have, which is bad. So this has been good.
Like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's I think though with the remote presentation and the remote meeting, you do want to kind of simplify a little bit.
You
Um,
can get real tired, just
yeah.
listening to a lot of that.
And the fact that like the older demographic they're like, I gotta pee, I gotta go to my kid's soccer game. Like it just, you never know. They'll make an excuse so you want to try and obviously keep everything under a couple hours. I've had meetings that go 4 hours, it's nothing wrong with that. But they are talkers and they have a lot to say.
And they want to know, like they want their nephew to sing and
Yeah, there are a lot of
character.
they wanted to. And like I don't even think it was on here, but there is usually a spot for like what kind of songs and music you want to play. And it's just stuff that I'm assuming when they put this together, they were looking at like what's important, what's essential, and then all that other stuff like picking music and whatnot. It just again takes away from the time to like get to the actual pre-planning. Uh,
How long does Digicon normally take?
Digicon,
Like probably 15, 20 minutes.
yeah. I mean, at most. I would say
You're
10
just
minutes.
copying stuff, right?
Yeah, so when you have the all this filled out, you have everything you need to complete Digicon except for those health questions
Yeah.
uh, and the payment method. So I think, you know, you have multiple screens, I know that. So you just keep them on one screen, you got them on Zoom, they're working on the contact list. You're going through Digicon, you're asking them a couple questions about payment method and health questions. and then it's all done, and then the signature, remote signature, whatnot. Um, I One of our agents who's working with K&L, she's having a heck of a time trying to get Brian to help coordinate like meeting with a family who is
Not remotely.
sign things in person. So she met with them and she estimated and they're ready to go. They don't want to sign remotely. And so it's been a point of frustration trying to like arrange that. So just be aware, like sometimes families will be like, I don't want to do the whole electronic signature. I want to sign in person. So it'll be good to, maybe lean on like Robbie or Evan a little bit if you're having trouble getting in touch with somebody at the funeral home, which is probably what I should be doing to help her arrange this. But not every family is going to want to do it, the signature remotely. They want to do the old-fashioned way.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um,
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry. I mean, now that I kind of see it, it's nice. I mean, I think you did a really good job of simplifying and putting what's most important, and transitions were really smooth. So honestly could probably send you this today, maybe. I'm gonna try and run through it a couple times. I just was spending way too much time to the point where it was like really tiring, where it's like,
yeah,
and it's also like the way you describe some of the personal information, like, okay, this is for this is for the obituary, this is for the death certificate, this is for, that's helpful too, because like I didn't know that. And so just that alone, like explaining makes sense as far as why we need that information.
I think too another point that I actually noticed about myself is I ask them. It's sort of like this thing where we say like don't ask them what they want, be an advisor. And I think that I really mix those two things together. So I will let them know like most families choose XYZ and I'd recommend based on, what your wishes are, this I'd probably recommend a casket to them, for example, like a great one for a veteran, for example. Um,
Yeah.
and I would also make sure that I'm still asking them like, the place for or I asked about like the flowers. So I asked her, what were your kind of favorite flowers? What is your favorite color of flowers? Okay, great. Well, let me put aside some allowance for some flowers here because that's pretty common, pretty traditional. Same with like register book, this is pretty traditional. So I just start like putting it in there and I'll wait for them to say, hey, I don't want that. And that's fine. But like me being their trusted advisor and putting together like a proper funeral service, I believe they should have a registered book, right? So I'm going to put it in there and wait for them to object to it. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I want to give them options. I want to make them feel like they are a part of this process, but then also I'm making recommendations, at the same time.
So the only question I have, I guess, is like if it's a cremation, then like I mean, it just is a lot quicker because there's a lot less information that you need to like, where it's like,
Yeah.
if you can pull up the thing again real quick for me, the Final Wish Organizer. So if someone, I guess this is my last question. So if you scroll down to like the planning sheet right here,
Here.
yeah. So so then disposition preference, you'd say cremation, and then I guess like it just like if they don't have a place they want to, then it would just be like a memorial service. You'd only put down a way to honor them, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I would say like the ultimate goal,
You
it's
just
okay.
kind of skip over all that other stuff.
Yeah, if it's okay if there's not like if there's no reception, if there's no viewing or visitation, that's okay. I think the goal at a minimum for especially for like a simple cremation is to find out like where is the gathering going to happen. Um,
Okay.
and we could call that memorial service, and that's just going to be like at Denny's, like favorite restaurant. It could be anywhere, but we want to designate like a time and place for that and be
You
able to.
always recommend that if someone
Yeah,
has a, and
yeah,
you say because of the way you've internalized the script, you'd be like, well, one thing that's important is because why we have a memorial service is so that you can control the time and place when this first important discussions happen about your death, rather than, allowing that to happen, at a grocery store, church, work. Um,
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
want to be able to make sure that instead of having multiple funerals, we only have one funeral service. And
Yeah.
so that's why we typically, even for just a simple cremation, we like to have a memorial service dedicated at a certain place. And then that's how you'd pitch it, right?
That's one of the phrases I left out too, is the instead of one funeral, we'll have multiple funerals. I think that's a really like the shock value there is pretty effective, because I think a lot of people like they don't want people to have the funeral, like they just don't want them to like grieve, right? And so they don't want them to be sad, they don't want them to cry. And so I think that the like news flash to them here is like they're gonna cry. They're going to discuss your death. Like it's going to happen. And it'll happen in multiple different places if we don't have a plan for it.
Yeah.
A better way to do it is do it all at once in a proper time and place. And that way, it takes care of it all.
So for a simple cremation, you leave everything, you just leave it blank for the place to connect, uh, moment to say goodbye.
Unless the viewing or something, if they wanted any kind of, yeah,
You just
viewing,
put NA or would you just leave it blank?
leave it blank.
Okay,
That's
leave
fine.
it blank. And then you do way to honor, you do the memorial service, and then what I guess the luncheon would with the luncheon you just put Denny's or if it was at Denny's? Or what if they want to have like a
Well, like, so some kind of gathering, they could say like, that's just going to happen at my home. Okay, great. And so, a reception afterwards, do you want them to go out to lunch? Or do you want them to maybe like get some catering for the home? Okay, great. So we would say like they're going out to restaurant or actually um, lunch, and that's at Denny's. Everyone gets a mimosa. Um, so that's again the way I would sort of interpret. I'm not saying like this is probably never going to be but it's a chance to then say, okay, great. When we get to estimating, instead of just a simple cremation, we're going to leave some allowance for them to go out to lunch, after.
and where would you leave that in, I guess?
I would go down here. So then I would estimate simple cremation services, death certificates, etc. And then I would get down to afterward, and
Oh,
I would
okay.
station Denny's. That even autofills it there. Denny's, and I put it aside like an allowance for that.
Oh, cool.
And so by doing that, again, we're making sure we're addressing like when the gathering is going to happen that the family's taken care of in full,
Yeah.
um, because there's an allowance left behind for them. Um, so, it's again, that minimum goal is to try and get some kind of gathering taken care of in this estimate. There's going to be families that just say, hey, I don't want any gathering. My family's not going to do it. Like they're just going to say no, no, no to everything. That's okay. I think your goal would just be kind of gently, you know, respectfully challenge them on that and say, no, look, I think your family is going to, be grieving at that time and they will come together in some form or fashion. Um, this is your chance to kind of help them through that time by telling them the place that you'd want them to gather at and honor your life, instead of leaving it up to chance.
Yeah, and I didn't know about the traditional package savings too. Like I didn't, that was something I learned new. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I think before we were talking about like, oh, would I be showing them the estimate while I'm going through it? I think it seems like almost like I'm trying to hide these things from them. If I unshare my screen, while I'm going through the estimate, I think it's fine to start throwing in, values here. And then if there is a package, say like, I'm about to show you the package savings, right? So as you see that number going up and up and up, which is a good thing at the same time too, you want them to see like, okay, this is gonna be a high number, so that when they get to and they see that grand total, they're like, "Oh my gosh, do I have to pay that all at once?" And you say, "Well, actually, the good thing about pre-planning is you have options. We have payment plan options, and then you show them their options down here." Um, so does that all make sense?
All makes complete sense. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna run through it like three more times today. Um, I just print out the memorial guide or the final wish organizer and I just look at that stuff pasted on my wall and then I just kind of run through it. But now I have more insight as far as what to like mention, like about even just filling out that information is super helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's one of those things like
All the personal information.
that's why I was hoping for like a, role play video, but you might get a chance to sit down with one of the staff in Montana when you do get to visit, and watch them do this with a family who isn't prearranging. They're at need. They're going through this on the day that somebody passed away, and maybe they don't know the answers to all that stuff. So you get to see like firsthand why it's important to get down where the mom was born, where dad was born, and what was their job, how many years did they do that job for? Like, I don't know those answers about my own mom off the top of my head. So it
Yeah.
just, it's one of those things that helps to eliminate a lot of burden, um, you know, forgetting just the costs. It's the
Well, and
information.
yeah, and even then putting that on the to-do list too is important.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
that like for an example, like I didn't know the county, you know.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. That's one of the things that for the to-do list. And that's something that like the funeral home can figure that out. It's not, I wouldn't leave that for the family to have to figure out. But if they truly didn't know where mom or dad was born, then that's homework for them.
Okay, cool. Well, I got my accent ready to go, so I'll match it here.
We're like on the last 6 episodes of Yellowstone, so I'm right there with you, the whole
Oh
nine.
yeah, good. You'll love that show. That show it makes you want to buy a cowboy hat, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Funny.
Uh, cool. Well, yeah, this was good. Let me
Okay.
know what's up with, and keep me posted on if you do schedule time to go to Montana. Want to be,
Yeah, so Brian, I sent you the message. So probably it's middle of next week is when I'll go out there. Um,
yeah, hopefully you can get all the families at once to come on in. That'd be
yeah,
great.
so it's gonna be a little different because they're walking organic leads. Robbie was telling me that like maybe I shouldn't like go over the final wish organizer with them and just like go through Digicon with them because that's what he did when he was like with people because they're more organic, they're not Procoa leads. But honestly, I might just go through the final wish organizer. I mean, maybe I might not spend as much time on certain things, but like I just think I'm just gonna nail that down honestly and just bring it and kind of have it printed out, I guess, and just have them fill it out in front of me as we go through it.
I agree that with walking column leads, you spend less time on the organizer. But I think that you're understanding like why it's important to talk about the acute loss period. So especially if the walking column lead has come to you saying I want a simple cremation, then yeah, talk about the acute loss period. I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good structure. I guess the only thing that we never really talked about was when you were going through the final wish organizer, as I'm internalizing all this, with my memory and all, you mentioned that we would go back over the memorial guide, which we never did throughout the script. What, when would you go through that again, I guess?
So the memorial guide,
Because you know how notice how we never filled that out?
you're talking about, let me show the screen again. You're talking about this one here,
Yeah. Is that what you were talking about? How people to contact and stuff like that? Is that what you're talking about?
special people to be contacted. So they put this here, which is, again, like not a great place for it because I like to address this while I'm working on the paperwork. Um,
Okay, that makes sense now.
this is the only part that was left blank intentionally. The rest of it, I did get everything
But
else
that's
in.
what you mean. That's what you put in there, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So this is just essential contacts for that day, close friends or family, which is really gathering referral opportunities for you. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. And honestly, too, if you prefer, when you're meeting with people in person, when you go to Montana, you could use just the digital final wishes organ. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You could just print it out afterwards and give them a folder and put all the pages in there. If you like this one better, and this one you're going to use more often anyway, you could just start using this and get used to it. Everything's neater on when it's typed up anyway. So I say go for it. I'm doing that one.
Do you think if I was meeting with someone in person, I
Yeah,
guess
that's what
you
I'm
would
saying.
still do it on the computer, or would you have them like write it out in front of them? Would that be a little bit easier, you think? be like, hey, you want to go and fill this out real quick, and then I can just be walking them through it.
So you can do it on your computer if you think it'd be quicker. So it's sort of that balance, right? Of like spending a lot of time with the family because you're handwriting stuff, or typing stuff up goes quicker. Some people say like don't have a computer screen in front of you and the family that, doesn't help with the connection with them. It's not the end of the world, right? If you have a computer screen up, but
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
what I was curious. Like for them, what they would find more, I guess, like connecting,
yeah, right.
or what like more smooth, or just what would be better. So I don't know. It's good.
Um, while I'm thinking about it too, do you have physical Final Wishes organizers? Did we send you any of those?
Have what?
Like physical Final Wishes organizers?
Mm.
Okay.
You mean
Uh,
is one I just have to print, or what?
no, they are actual folders.
Oh, can I go pick them up from Krakoa?
I'm not sure. Well, I mean, I'm sure that there might be some in Utah, but um, the thing is, they come pre filled with like insurance paperwork specific to that state. And so
How do I get some of that from Montana?
for my yeah, I could have some shipped to you. I'm not sure if they'll get there in time by when you go there. I could have them shipped to K&L um, as well, if that makes it easier. So that way you can have a folder. They might already have like folders there too. So if it doesn't get there in time, it's okay. Um, but yeah, I can have some shipped over there. That way, when you do get there, you'll have physical versions of it.
Is there anything I should expect differently from it, from like the actual folder? You said pre-filled what?
Well, so no, the paperwork, like the physical insurance paperwork, is for
Oh,
Montana. But if you do everything on Digicon still, then you shouldn't have to worry about that. So I'm just kind of thinking through, like,
oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying basically the physical paperwork would be what you normally go through through Digicon.
yeah, exactly. So, but just to give you like a folder that says Final Wishes Organizer on it would be probably better. You
In
know,
person.
so, um, but at the same time too, well, yeah. Why don't I just, yeah, I'll ship some to K&L, and just know that that paperwork's in there. You can just take out the insurance paperwork and basically recycle it because I would do everything on I would stick to Digicon.
Good to
And
have
then
it just in case the Digicon doesn't work or something like that.
yeah, you have
I think
the
I need to
backup.
get a new, I think I need to get a new Surface because my Surface is like maybe 3, 4 years old and it's just so slow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really does.
Uh,
Um,
I'm like, I have to like keep it plugged in, you know? It's like,
oh, one charge.
yeah, it's not that old. It's driving me nuts. And I might need to buy another one.
Maybe Robbie can get you one. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna call Robbie in a bit too, and apologize for the whole remote team not being super helpful. Address that with him. But yeah, so I'll send you that stuff, and it will have like the trifold in there with the acute loss period graphic on it and everything. So I think that would be good if you're going to go over it with a family in person. Having that as a tool would be good. Um,
Okay. Well, this is helpful. So now I feel like I got a good grasp of how things should go, and I like the time that you spent on it. So I just wonder like how much traditionally it's going to be, and how much it might differ. But as long as I get a fully grasp of everything.
yeah, I mean, I think a remote agent for Montana has been writing a lot of like simple cremations, but she throws some services in there sometimes. So it's a good mix up in Montana so far. Um, but like we said, Callahan, I said all traditional. So it just depends on the state.
Yeah.
Um, so, awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you get to it. And yeah, like I said, just know I'm going to call